Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Bear Studios here, and today we're going to make a globe. We start out by deleting the default cube. Pressing X, delete. Now we're going to add in a UV sphere, press Shift A, mesh UV sphere. We're going to give it a subdivision level of 2 by pressing the shortcut for subdivision surface, which is Ctrl and 2. Going to shade it smooth, and to fix this top side and bottom side artifact, we're going to add in a new modifier called normal edit. Now it should be gone. Going into front view by pressing 1, pressing tab to go into the edit mode, taking the edge selection mode and pressing alt to select this part of the sphere. I'm going back to the front view, going to duplicate it by pressing Shift D and scaling it up a bit by pressing S and maybe a little bit to the side, G and X, now moving it to the side like this, scaling it down on the Z axis so it brings these 2 points closer to each other. And I'm going to separate this mesh from the sphere, pressing P and selection. I'm going to select my little line here, I'm going to convert it into a curve, convert curve, which gives me an option here, this curve option, where I can actually give depth to the curve on the geometry panel. Going depth, by clicking here you see you got some depth on the curve, and also I don't want it to be rounded, so I'm going to lower the resolution to the 0, so I'm left with this kind of form. I would like to turn it a little bit, so if I want to turn it, I have to go into the edit mode, and now by pressing N, I get this new window here, and I can move this option here, which rotates our little object. So I would like to give it a mean tilt of 45 degrees, and I'm left with that kind of form here. Now, if I'm happy with this one, I can actually just convert it back into mesh, object, convert it to mesh, and now here is my mesh. I would also like to give this a little bit of inset, so I'm going to the face selection, pressing Alt to select this side, pressing Alt Shift, selecting other side, and insetting it a little bit by pressing E. Pulling it down a bit, like this maybe, and now extruding it, pressing right mouse button to reset it, and now Alt S, which will eventually push it inside. Maybe something like this would be fine. Also closing my gaps, going on this edge selection mode, selecting these 4 edges, pressing F, and the same thing on the bottom side. Back to front view, and look how it looks like. Pretty happy about it. Yeah, it should be more even, but I think I'm going with it for now. Nextly, I'm going to add this part here. I'm going to go to the vertex select mode, selecting my vertex, pressing Shift S to get this pie menu, putting cursor to select it so my 3D cursor jumps onto the vertices, going back to the object mode and adding in a circle. I'm going to scale down the circle because it's not flat area here on top. I'm going to the front view and pulling it down a bit so it's actually inside of my mesh, scaling it down a little bit more, maybe like this, and now extruding it up, pressing E and Z to lock the axis like this. Maybe you want it to be a little bit like this, then I'm going to scale it down, extrude Z, scale it, extrude Z, scale it, or just extrude scale so it's going inwards, extrude Z. It's all how you just like to have it. So just going to hold the globe. Yeah, maybe like this. Go back to the solid view, back to the object mode, and this is how it looks like. Going to shade it smooth, and also I'm going to give it a bevel modifier so it looks like this. Going to add some segments to it, maybe 3 is nice. I think that's good enough. And if I want to have this little part exactly on the same place going around the globe, I can just put my cursor on the middle of the globe, by pressing Shift S, cursor to selected. So I can now actually select my top part, pivoting point to the 3D cursor, Shift D, scale C -1. And now I have these on the both sides of my globe. If you want these to have a little bit longer side, you can move them around. You can select them and move them a little bit further maybe. It all depends how you want it to look like. Yeah, something like this would be fine. And now we're going to make a leg, adding a circle, mesh, circle, tab into edit mode, grab Z, pull it down a bit. Going to scale it down by pressing S. Something like this. Going to extrude it up, pressing Z. Extrude, scale. Extrude Z again. Scaling it down, S. I think it got a little bit too high, so I'm pressing G and Z to bring it a little bit lower. I'm extruding it up again by pressing E and Z, like this. Extrude Z again, then I'm going to scale it outside a bit. Extrude Z, extrude Z, Z again, push it inwards. Now I'm going to press extrude and Z. I'm going to scale it down like this. Extrude Z, push it outside, extrude Z, push it up. Extrude S to scale it, grab and Z. Something like this. I think something like this looks pretty nice. Now I'm going to add some loop cuts here. I'm going to scale this part down by pressing S. I selected it by pressing Alt and clicking on the loop. Just scaling these parts down. And now I'm manually adding some bevels to it. So I'm going to select the edges by pressing Alt and holding down Shift, Alt Shift, and clicking on the edges where I want the edge to be a little bit sharper. I think all these edges. I have to go to the edge selection mode. Like this. Making these edges a bit sharper. Control B. Going to bevel them manually like this. Shade smooth. Also filling in the top gap, pressing Alt and clicking on it, pressing F and insetting it like this. Also this edge could be sharper, so I'm pressing Control B to make it a little bit sharper. Now I'm going to add here a subdivision surface modifier by pressing Control 2, and I look at from front view. This is how it looks now. I need to grab and Z and pull it up like this. This is my globe's leg, and I also look these cool stripes here. I would like to have these stripes to see better. I'm going to disable now the modifier by clicking on this TV sign here. And I'm going to select all the edges. To make the selection faster for me, I'm going to separate these two parts for now by selecting the edges and pressing V, which is rib for faces, right clicking. Now I can just click on one edge, I can click on other edge. With the gap I want them to select them, and I can just Ctrl Shift plus, select these like this, clicking on plus, and it selects them like this. Now I can go to the select menu and select loops. Now it's selecting all these parts. I'm going to make a copy out of these loops by Shift D, right click to spawn them on the same place they were, pressing P to separate them, selection. Now this mesh is separated, so I'm going to join it back together. So I'm pressing A to select all, M to merge by distance, and these vertices that were on each other are going to collapse now. See, remove 64. Going to select my edges here. Where are my edges? Select them from here then. And I'm going to convert these into curves, like object, convert, curve, like I had them before. This is my curve, back to curve settings. And I'm going to give them some depth. These I'm going to leave as rounded, but I think these top edges and bottom sides are too big. So I'm going to scale them down just by going to edit mode and going to the viewport shading. And by selecting the top parts, I can go Alt S to scale them a little bit down like this. And same for these lower parts. I'm going to click Alt S to scale them down a bit. Go back to solid view, and how is it looking? Looking pretty neat. I can also click to fill gaps. Fill gaps, and it is filling all these gaps there. If you'd like a thickness, you can always make it smaller, like 0.005 or something like this. You can then see the result. Back to the front view, and this is what we came up now. Now for the middle part, I'm going to edit mode, selecting the middle part, Shift D to duplicate, right click, hops back to its place, going to convert it into the curve, but for that we have to separate it, so P, selection, back to the object mode by pressing tab, select our little line here, object, convert it into the curve, convert curve, and also now we're going to add some depth like we did before with this edge here. Now I convert it back to mesh, convert back to mesh, and I'm going to give it some detail by selecting the middle part and just scaling it inwards so we get this little fancy detail here. Also, I'm going to add here a subdivision modifier on the second level. I think we forgot it here. Oh, we didn't. We have a subdivision level 2 there. Very good. Now I'm going to add a floor to finish it up. So Shift A, mesh, plane, bring it down. G, Z to bring it down on the floor. Scale it up in edit mode. Click tab to go to edit mode. Scale it up. Going to select the edge to extrude it up. Pressing E and Z. Pulling it up. Just selecting the middle edge. Ctrl B to bevel it. Scrolling to get it more smoother. Also adding 2 loop cuts on sideways. Ctrl R to add 2 loop cuts. And then right click to spawn them on the middle. Scale them on X-axis to put them on the side. And now I'm going to shade it smooth and add a level 2 subdivision by clicking Ctrl and 2. Now this is our globe. Now there's one more thing left to do, to select our different parts and to rotate it. For that I'm going to the front view to ensure that I rotate it correctly. I have to pivot on the medium point for that, and I am going to rotate it like this, and it should rotate correctly. Sometimes the order matters, so be sure maybe to select the sphere as the last object. Thank you for watching. See you soon.